Welcome to In the Zone. I'm your host, Brad Wood. With shocking NFL results, the MLB playoff shaping up, and a new week of college football, we have a lot to talk about. So let's get into it. In the Zone starts now. Joining me on desk for today's episode, we have Bailey Toporcer and Owen Hook to discuss the standings after week 3 of the NFL season, with some teams like the Bengals and the Jaguars winless, while Sam Darnold begins his redemption arc with a 3-0 record, along with Justin Fields making a stand for the starting quarterback position in Pittsburgh. Bailey, what is the biggest surprise for you so far with the NFL standings?
So I'm really happy that you mentioned Sam Darnold because I do have one thing to say. No J.J. McCarthy, no problem here. You know, many thought that the Vikings season was really going to be a wash, but I will say talks with Justin Jefferson being traded, Sam Darnold and Kevin O'Connell have dominated and have the Vikings firing on all cylinders. Honestly, playing Houston this week, people thought, okay, these people have Super Bowl aspirations, but sadly, they ended up looking like the Houston of 3 years ago. You know, they beat the Texans on every single side of the ball, and Sam Darnold really looks like a real member for MVP with 4 touchdowns this year.
I won't go as far as say MVP, but honestly, seeing the Vikings do well, and it proves that Justin Jefferson, for example, doesn't matter the QB, he'll be able to get receptions, do well in the end zone, and do as well for my fantasy team. Now, Owen, what surprises do you see with the NFL standings?
Well, to me, there isn't really much to pick apart here. I was kind of surprised about how the Eagles beat the Saints, and I'm an Eagles fan. Despite beating the Saints, I'm going to be honest, we did not deserve that win. We looked really bad in the first half. And the game itself was not a great game either. It was 3-0 Saints at halftime. The only problem was the Eagles decided they somehow needed to wake up in the second half, and they finally decided to start scoring points. But by then, it was still close, and the game ended off with a field goal difference. It was 15-12, with the Eagles winning via an interception that almost got called back, but they said the ruling on the field stands. And yet, the Eagles still won. They're 2-1, with their only loss being to the Falcons, which, as we all knew, the Eagles blew it away. How do you do that?
I don't even know, but I can tell you one thing. The Eagles are not flying right now. I mean, I was watching that game during my break at work, and abysmal football. Boring. I thought I was watching the Pittsburgh Steelers with offense-wise, but man, I mean, Jalen Hurts, man, I'll say this again and again. He is a system QB. Can't really carry it, but even then, he wasn't making much mistakes. I mean, he had a really high passing percentage, but the problem was he was playing really safe, didn't have A.J. Brown or anything like that, so tough for the birds, but, you know, like, I care. In America's Game of the Week, Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens visited Dak Prescott and the Dallas Cowboys for what seemed to be a Ravens blowout. At one point, the Ravens were leading 28-6 in the fourth quarter, but the Cowboys weren't going away that easily, as it came down to the wire, and the Ravens were able to sneak away with a 28-25 win. Owen, this game seems to leave a lot more concerns on both teams than optimism. What are your thoughts about this game?
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, especially for the Ravens, because for the Ravens, this is a really off year from what they've had previously. I mean, the Ravens last year got all the way to the AFC Championship, having it in their own stadium, M&T Bank Stadium, which I actually remember because I was at the AMS conference in Baltimore during the time that the AFC Championship game was played out. I was watching it from my hotel room because I wasn't going to go out of my way to purchase a ticket to the game. Probably runs up like $1,001. But for the Ravens, this is not a good start to the year and not what they need. They started out 0-2, and they just now won their first game, which was only won by a difference of a field goal. They only won by 3 points. As for the Cowboys, it's the Cowboys. They always like to say, "We dem boys." Well, if you're them boys, why are you starting 1 and 2 just like the Ravens? I mean, granted, for them, this game was close, and they did handily beat the Browns 33-17. But what we also need to take into consideration is they lost 44-19 to the Saints, who this week were beaten by the Eagles. And speaking of the Eagles and the NFC East teams, not only did the Eagles win, the Giants won, they beat the Browns, and the Commanders won, they beat the Bengals, albeit it was close, and the Cowboys lost. That makes the Cowboys the only NFC East team this week to lose. And how about them Cowboys? How about that loss? That's what I'd like to say.
You know, I agree, but speaking more about the Ravens, playing down to competition as per usual, just like last week against the Raiders. And, oh man, that cracks me up as a Steelers fan. But Bailey, what are your thoughts about this game?
Yeah, I will say I expected a little bit more out of the Ravens in this game. I expected there to be a little bit more of a gap in that score there. It really coming down to just that one field goal. It was not how I saw the game going. You know, looking at just the stats and looking at last year, I really saw the Ravens doing more. And for them not to be able to do what everybody kind of expected them to do, it was a little bit surprising, but at the same time, for those Ravens fans, it probably was a moment of disappointment. And honestly, I kind of feel bad on that end.
You know, I don't feel bad seeing the Ravens play down to competition as per usual, but what can you do, right? And saying the Steelers on top of the AFC North, ain't that crazy? In a Sunday Night Football classic, the Kansas City Chiefs took the trip down south to Mercedes-Benz Stadium to take on the Atlanta Falcons. In what seemed to be a closely contested game, Chiefs shut down the Falcons' offense by only allowing 3 points in the second half. Patrick Mahomes helped lead the Chiefs to a 22-17 victory. Now, Bailey, is it too soon to say that Andy Reid will lead the Kansas City Chiefs to a three-peat?
Well, I will say it's probably just a little bit early to make any calls, but as a Chiefs fan, I do have to say that I can see a lot of hope for the team and hope for the entire season as a whole. Now, I can even say, as a Chiefs fan, the red zone has been a moment of struggle for us. We have not been able to convert touchdowns as much as we'd like to, with only a 44% percentage rate in that red zone. And if we were able to convert that a little bit better and make a little bit more dynamic plays, I feel like we could be in a great position for a Super Bowl. But at the same time, we did lose Isaiah Pacheco. So that is a big major player that we lost. But Rashee Rice has really stepped up on the offensive line. And if we're able to bring in Travis Kelce a little bit more, and we're able to create a lot of dynamic plays between Patrick Mahomes and Rashee Rice and Travis Kelce, I honestly think that the offense is going to be unstoppable. And I do think that there is a chance.
I think there's always a chance, and they're definitely the team to beat, but the defense always gives concern. But Owen, right now, Chiefs 3-0, they're doing well. Do you think they get the three-peat going, or do you think it's not meant to be?
Well, to answer the first question, they better not. I am sick of seeing the Chiefs in the Super Bowl, especially considering the fact that since, I believe, 2019, either 2019 or 2018, the Chiefs have gotten at least to the AFC Championship, and they've won more times than they haven't. They've been to, I think it was 4 or 5 Super Bowls within the past couple of years. 4. And they've won 3 of them. They won against the 49ers twice, and they won against the Eagles, which probably would not have happened if it wasn't for that terrible call, the suspicious call. But now there's the chance of a three-peat. And if you want my opinion, having the same champion every year is just completely boring. You want to give the others a chance. Now, if this was the Eagles, I'd probably be a little bit more biased, but in the case of the Chiefs, I'm just really sick of them being in the championship. Now, do I think it's going to happen? Yeah, I do. I do think it's going to happen. I do think they're pretty much guaranteed to get to the playoffs. Will they go winless? Winless.
It's okay, lossless. I know exactly what you mean, but hey, I just hope, for one, the Kansas City Chiefs will not make it that far. But now we're turning to Major League Baseball. For the first time in 13 years, the Philadelphia Phillies have won the NL East after JT Realmuto set a tone in the second inning by cracking a 421-foot bomb to center field. The Phillies piled on to the lead and never looked back, beating the Cubs 6-2. if the season ended today, the Phillies will be sitting in the second seed, awaiting the wild card winner between the Brewers and the Diamondbacks. Now, Owen, the Diamondbacks surprised everybody last year by beating the Phillies and going on to the World Series. Now, do you think the Diamondbacks are going to be a threat to the Phillies, or do you think the Phillies are going to be different this year and hopefully progress to the World Series?
Well, I think it's a little bit of a toss-up, especially when it comes to the Phillies. I mean, the Phillies have actually been really good this year. They've surprised a number of people to the point where, as we've known, the Phillies won the NL East. I actually watched that game from Jax as well, or rather, the closing of that game when they got the final out and finally became NL East championships for the first time since 2011. It's been that long. However, the Phillies have had a regression trend when it comes to the playoffs. In 2022, they made it all the way to the World Series against the Astros, only to lose to them, which it was 4-2, which could be worse, but still, they lost. And then the following year, they lost in the championship round for the National League, losing to the aforementioned Diamondbacks in a, I believe it was 4-2 shock. So the Phillies have a lot to prove this year. They need to prove that they're that good and that they're not just there only to get blown out. But with our record, I think we do have a genuine shot. We will definitely get to the divisionals. The championship and beyond, though, I think is a little bit questionable.
A little bit questionable indeed. Now, Bailey, what are your thoughts about the Phils?
You know, I respect the Phillies for their ability to go out and play and do as well as they're doing right now. Honestly, I do think it comes down to them being able to play under pressure. Are they going to be able to come together as a team in the moment whenever they need it, and are they going to be able to get to where they want to be? Honestly, I think it's a coin flip. I think they have proven in the past that they've struggled under some pressure. Again, as what he just mentioned, they have lost in that final round against the Astros. But at the same time, I think that there's a lot of positive that the Phillies have proven this year that they haven't proven in past years. So honestly, my bets are probably on yes, that they're going to be successful.
Interesting take indeed, but we'll dive more. But in the National League, there are 4 teams within 2.5 games of the wildcard spots. Currently, the Kansas City Royals and the Detroit Tigers are both in the wildcard spots, with the Minnesota Twins and the Seattle Mariners just on the outside looking in. With 5 games left in the season for most of these teams, Bailey, do you see any chances for any changes in the wildcard standings?
You know, it's always possible. It's definitely really tight in the wild card standings right now. But I will say my bets are on the Royals right now. They have a really, really strong pitching staff. And if they're able to put together a strong bullpen, their hitting is phenomenal. They might not be hitting it the farthest, but they are hitting it very consistently. If they're able to get that bullpen working with a strong pitching staff, I really just see success for the Royals right now.
Success for the Royals. I'll tell you one thing, though. The Minnesota Twins be a little bit tough for them. They've been really struggling. But the Royals, I think, have a shot. But what about the Detroit Tigers, though, right? I mean, their starting pitching rotation has been absolutely phenomenal. And they're making a good run. They're getting hot at the right time. So who knows if we can see it go far. Owen, what do you think about the NL wildcard standings?
Well, I think it really is going to be a close contest. I think the top teams are the Royals and the Tigers, but as Bailey stated, if I had to state an opinion on this, it would probably be that the Royals do come out on top.
Okay. I mean, that's completely fair enough, Bo. So, I mean, we just got to see. But I'm excited for baseball season, playoffs. Absolutely excited. And one thing I got to say, though, is go Yankees. And we'll send it over to Max Vigue for the recap on a busy week for Marauder Athletics. Max?
Thanks, Brad. Millersville football suffered a tough loss against the IUP Crimson Hawks on homecoming, falling 42-14. However, sophomore QB Ryan Zelt had an impressive performance, being given a chance in the second half, not looking back, going 10-16 in pass attempts and picking up the 128 passing yards, getting a touchdown in the process. The football team are looking forward towards traveling to Lock Haven next week and coming home with the win. The men's soccer team has 2 games this past week, beating Shippensburg at home 3-0 and getting shut out to Lock Haven, losing 3-0. Men's soccer will be returning to the Ville for their alumni game against East Strasburg on Saturday. Women's soccer also split their 2 games this past week, beating Westchester 3-1 and losing to Bloomsburg at home 3-1. They are looking towards a tough matchup this weekend by playing the 21st ranked East Strasburg team. The Marauder volleyball team participated in the Rolling College Invitational, winning their first game, but they're losing their next 3 matches with a combined set score of 9-1. They'll be looking forward to kicking their season off with a win against Westchester tonight. And finally, the Marauder Golf split up this past week, with the men's team attending the Dickinson Invitational and the women's team playing the Millersville Fall Invitational. The men's team placed first, led by Timothy Peters, who shot 5 under par, with the women's team placing third, led by Emma Scotch, shooting 6 over par. Now let's send it back over to Brad and the crew, talking about Penn State's big win. Brad?
Thanks, Max. The Nittany Lions seem to be starting off the season off a bit slow, with a win against West Virginia and just getting by Bowling Green. But this past week, Penn State played with something to prove, shutting out Kent State 56-0. Looking ahead, Penn State will be hosting 19th-ranked Illinois. Bailey, after this Kent State game, do you feel confident that Penn State will leave Beaver Stadium with a win, or do you think Illinois will play spoiler with an upset?
You know, Penn State did struggle against Bowling Green. Now, watching Penn State live from Beaver Stadium, it was completely electric. You know, Penn State fans make competing in Beaver Stadium so difficult because they're so loud. It's like adding a whole other person on their defensive line. You know, the game against Bowling Green did not go as planned. They expected to win by a lot bigger of a gap. But honestly, Kent State's victory really showed that they were going to be able to go out there and prove that they have a really good spot and that they are able to compete when they need to. You know, going into the Illinois game, I do believe that Penn State is looking really strong, and I believe that Illinois may not know what's coming to them whenever the coach from Penn State has asked for white-out energy. So I really think that Illinois may struggle under that environment.
I can agree, especially with Penn State shutting out Kent State. Defense is on lock. But Owen, what are your thoughts about Penn State going forward, especially against Illinois?
Well, Penn State did originally struggle. They had a little bit of a struggle against West Virginia, but quickly picked up the pace. The aforementioned Bowling Green game obviously did not go to plan, but they did win it. They are undefeated so far, but the problem is Illinois has ruined Penn State games before, especially the 9 overtime game. That was terrible. Do I think they'll win this game? I'm pretty hopeful that they will, but I don't want to put my finger on it after seeing what Illinois is capable of after the past 3 years. But fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed indeed. We can hope for the best for Penn State. But there were some shocking moves made in the top 25 rankings this week, with the biggest headline being the Texas Longhorns moving into the #1 spot over Georgia. Owen, are you surprised with some of these changes in the rankings?
No, not really. I think after seeing Georgia struggle against Kentucky, which they almost lost, I think they only won by 1 point, it's not really much of a surprise to see them downgraded. What I am not surprised by is Florida State. They have been absolutely terrible the past couple of games. They have lost to Georgia Tech, they have lost to Boston College, and they have lost to Memphis. This is all after the previous season where they went undefeated and just missed the national championship. This is something that I like to call fall off of the century. How do you go from being undefeated and just missing the playoffs to now having a 1-3 record with their only win being against California by 5 points? And California isn't even ranked. None of the teams that they played have been ranked. They've lost to all unranked teams, getting unranked after their second game where they lost to Boston College relatively handily, and now they're bad. How do you do that?
I don't know, man. But Bailey, what are some of your thoughts with the rankings?
You know, I'm not really surprised by the rankings, honestly. I think everything pretty much went somewhat as predicted, but I do think that there are going to be a few changes in this upcoming week, and honestly, I'm excited to see it.
Me too, especially with conference play coming up. And I'll say one thing, the SEC looks very interesting. And I'm making a bold prediction right now. Really bold. Ole Miss win the SEC. I'm saying that right now. Now, taking a sneak peek into Week 5, we have some exciting top 25 matchups we'll be looking forward to, along with the Penn State and Illinois game that we mentioned earlier. Number 15 Louisville face off against number 16 Notre Dame, and the game of the week with number 2 Georgia Bulldogs going against the number 4 Crimson Tide. Also, an exciting story, Arch Manning could land his first start for the Longhorns in the SEC against former Mississippi State. Now, Bailey, what headlines about Week 5 are you most excited for?
You know, I am really excited as Miami will continue to dominate against Virginia Tech. Honestly, I think that that is going to be a big point to bring up. Now, the Louisville Cardinals are going to be playing down south this week, and I do believe that they are going to dominate Notre Dame. And I know that that's kind of up in the air, but at the same time, I think that Louisville has shown that they're very strong and that they have a really, really strong offense and defense against Notre Dame.
And I can agree with that. I think Notre Dame's ranked too highly in this a little bit. I feel like it should be ranked, but definitely in the 20s. But Owen, what are your thoughts about some of these matchups coming up?
I'm going to talk about Louisville and Notre Dame. I could easily see Louisville beating Notre Dame, especially with what happened in Notre Dame against Northern Illinois. They did lose by only 2 points. The problem was Northern Illinois was completely unranked. And Notre Dame actually paid them $1.4 million to take this L. Notre Dame is always ranked too highly. They do good for a while, only to completely choke it to an unranked team. As for Georgia and Alabama, who knows what could happen, especially considering the fact that Alabama beat Georgia last year, and Georgia was guaranteed a playoff spot until they lost the game. So this year, who knows what will happen?
I don't know, especially when it's down in Alabama. I think it'll be a really close game. But I feel like Georgia has some redemption. They're a really strong team. I think they can beat Alabama. That will do it for this episode of In the Zone. From Max, Vigue, Bailey, Toporcer, and Owen Hook, and the entire In the Zone crew, I'm your host, Brad Wood. And from Wicked Studio, thank you for tuning in. And we'll see you next week right here on In the Zone.